Welcome to Behind the Mic with Kirkus Reviews, where the subjects are audiobooks and the actors who narrate them. I'm Joe Reed, and with me, contributor Alan Minskoff. Hello, Alan.
Hi, Joe.
So tell me, what are the three books you're going to talk about this week?
Well, they are all fiction and all very, very different. The first one is Ghost Town, a novel by Colm Perrotta, and it's read by Robert Petkoff. The second is The News from Dublin, short stories from Colm Tóibín, read by Derbhle, Crotty, and Darragh, Shannon. The third one is Wolvers, a novel by Taylor Brown, read by Ramiz Monsef.
So we're starting with Ghost Town, Tom Perrotta, who's a great favorite of mine, actually.
And mine too. And this is Tom Perrotta kind of going back to his home place. It is a novelist who is quite successful, but years after he leaves his New Jersey hometown, he is invited back to give a reading. It opens up his memories of growing up there. And there were some very powerful things that happened to him there. And of course, Perrotta is a masterful storyteller, and the suburbs are his forte.
And this is a novel, so it's the character in the novel who's also a novelist.
Yes, and it's the character mostly when he is 13. And Petkoff does a very fine job of both the angsty older Jimmy Perini, the character who is the protagonist, and his earlier teen self. He's very convincing. And Perrotta is really good at the daily details of a suburban teen dealing with the impact of a personal loss. His mother dies when he's playing Little League Baseball.
I'm a great fan of Robert Petkoff. He's narrated close to 400 books spanning a wide range, everything from literature, mysteries, science fiction, epics, to really deeply researched nonfiction and political exposés. And I always find he creates such distinct and memorable voices for each character. And I think most importantly, has a real gift for engaging storytelling.
And this is real storytelling because there are ghosts in this novel. There's a seance. The 13-year-old has a kind of an older young woman who takes him to a seance. And there's an adolescent romance of a kind. And Perrotta's writing has life. This writer, who we see in some chapters, not in others, he's been successful as a TV writer. And of course, we know that this is true of Perrotta too. But his success outstripped his earlier, more literary writing. So there's that, which happens to some writers later in their lives. They get that successful moment with, say, TV or bestsellers. But their early literary stuff, kind of holds on to their heart.
It's interesting because I think of Perrotta as being kind of an edgy satirist. Election, I think, is probably one of his biggest books. And this seemed more melancholic, a little elegiac.
I think you're absolutely right, because he goes home. And this is true for Perrotta, too. He's from New Jersey. And I think he said, I read an interview, and he said in the interview that he had recently lost his mother. Now, it doesn't happen to him when he was 13, like the character in the novel, but it made him think about home. It made him think about the power of family. So that's very important in this.
That makes perfect sense. What made this book linger for me is how grounded it feels, even with the ghost story elements. Because, as you said, Perrotta is so sharp on the textures of 1970s suburban New Jersey. And awkward friendships, adolescent romance, neighborhood rituals.
And in white America.
Yes.
That's very important in this.
And Petkoff leans into these details with a very natural, very intimate delivery.
He's good with everyone. Like you said, his gift is that he can really differentiate, and slightly, between the older characters, the father and the son and the neighbors, and this kind of fascinating young woman who's sort of a brilliant, like 14, 15-year-old, and she and the young Jimmy Perini kind of get to know each other in that sort of adolescent way.
I would like to hear a little. Can you set this up for us?
It's very early in the book because he does set up this early scene of the wake, and so we're going to hear about a minute of that.
All right. Ghost Town, a novel by Tom Perrotta, and it's read by Robert Petkoff.
The viewing room felt way too big at the beginning of the wake, but it filled up quickly. The mourners waited patiently in single file, the way they waited for the Eucharist on Sunday, and then they stood for a few seconds in front of the open coffin, making the sign of the cross, saying a silent prayer, or whispering a few last words into his mother's ear. When they were done, they moved down the receiving line. It was just Jimmy and his father and his sister, and told them what a wonderful person she was, how much she'd done for the Girl Scouts and the PTA and the library, and what a shame it was because she was so young. But she was in heaven now, reunited with her parents and her older brother Matthew, technically Jimmy's uncle, though he'd died of polio at the age of 10, and she wasn't suffering any more, and that was a blessing. She loved you so much, they told him over and over and over. She was always so proud of you. After a while, it started to feel like a dream.
I know those wakes well. And I think Robert does a great job of setting the scene. You sense the stunned distance of the character, even as he keeps soldiering on, because he's a kid.
He's 13.
Yeah, he's a grieving 13-year-old who's kind of overwhelmed by things he can't quite name.
And this is such a powerful moment because his mom dies even though she's been sick, she dies kind of unexpectedly. She says, go play ball. And this happens while he's at his Little League game. And it's all very, as it would be, it's all very fast after that. And it gives you a sense, he is a very appealing kid. He's a very appealing kid, and he's like a lot of 13-year-olds. He gets sort of led by the nose sometimes. His relationship with his sister and his father is very real and very persuasive.
Well, let's move on to the news from Dublin, which are stories by Colm Tóibín. And that also has a sense of melancholy to it.
I'm going to set the scene for you. Melancholy really hangs over these stories. It is very powerful, and it makes them stay with you. His characters are in extremis. Almost everywhere in this audiobook, the characters are going through stuff. And in the story that we're going to hear, Sleep, the Irishman is having a love affair with an American, and yet he is very deeply disturbed by something that happened to him early in his life. I don't want to say too much because it is a very powerful story that people should listen to. The theme, I would argue, of many of these stories is self-revelation. The title story is one of the most powerful in the entire collection. And it is a story where it's not successful. One of the brothers of a family of brothers has tuberculosis. And his brother, who's a teacher, goes to Dublin to see if he can get some help from the government. I won't say more. So this is the news from Dublin. The narrators both are very, very good, and I frankly enjoy the listening to that Irish accent. It makes it very real, and it puts them in place.
Oh, yeah. I would think it would. I mean, it did for me. I love their narrations of it. And I was also struck by how the book takes us from Wexford, for example, in Ireland, to Argentina, and in time from the early 20th century to the mid-50s to the present. And stories are switching between the first person and the third person.
He's a talent. He's a talented storyteller, and he writes very well about Argentina and Spain and New York and Dublin. The thing that hangs them together is this feeling of melancholy. It just is pervasive through virtually every story. And yet they're all very different.
I agree, they are. And there's so much about dislocation in this, about what does it mean to live at such a distance from home and your past.
Absolutely. The Spain story in Catalan, those folks have been living in Argentina, and they go back because there's an inheritance. And they go back, and yet some of them want to stay and some of them don't. And there are three sisters in that story, and they're all very different, and they all have very different needs and wants and aspirations.
And what story are we going to hear an excerpt from?
We're going to hear what I started with, which is Sleep, which is the story of these two men in a love affair, one an Irishman, one a New York Jewish guy, and that's important to the story. And the Irishman is dealing with some things from his past that he hasn't resolved.
Okay, this is the news from Dublin, stories by Colm Tóibín. It's read by Derbhle Crotty and Darragh Shannon. We'll be hearing from Darragh.
It is strange how much unwitting effort it has taken to bring us here. The engineers and software designers could never have guessed, as they laid out their strategies and sought investment, that the thing they were making, the internet, would cause two strangers to meet and then, after a time, to lie in the half-light of the morning, holding each other. Were it not for them, we would never have been together in this place. One day you ask me if I hate the British, and I say that I do not. All that is over now. It is easy to be Irish these days. Easier, maybe, than being Jewish and knowing, as you do, that your great aunts and uncles perished at Hitler's hands, and that your grandparents, whom you love and visit sometimes on Long Island, lost their brothers and sisters. They live with that catastrophe day in, day out. It is a pity that there is such great German music, you say, and I tell you that Germany comes in many guises, and you shrug and say, not for us.
I think both Derbhle and Darragh understand how much restraint matters in Tóibín's work, and neither narrator pushes the emotion, which I think makes those moments of loneliness and regret and self-recognition land that much harder.
He is in that tradition of spare and restrained prose that very often makes the piece that much stronger, if that makes sense. But that's how I listen to it, because the prose itself lets the action take over.
Yes, I think Tóibín is so good at writing people caught in emotional transition. You know, there are characters who've left a country, a relationship, one version of themselves behind, but they're not quite settled into that next stage.
And The Sleep is a hypnotic story. It just takes you from one place to from one country to the other. And it's also a story of diminishing love that ranges from New York to Dublin.
And now we go to Wolvers by Taylor Brown, read by Ramiz Monsef. And I will just say on the outset, this is absolutely not a book for me. I've read great reviews from people I respect, but there is no way I would read or listen to this book. I couldn't get through an excerpt.
All right, well, we'll agree to disagree on that. And of course, I live...
No, it's fine. I'm not saying it's not a good book. I'm saying it's not a book for me.
And that's fair. It is a book for me. Now, I, of course, live in Idaho, in one of the places where wolves were released. And so the life of wolves in a state like ours is a meaningful thing. And also, I'm in a place where there are militia and there are people in that far end, on both ends of the environmental issues. And wolves' reentry in the West is a flashpoint.
Well, I think you should give a little bit of a summary of
All
the
right,
book.
let's do it. So this is a book about a young rancher whose ranch has just failed, and he is all by himself. He is a transformative character in that he goes from a person who is hunting wolves to a person who's protecting them. And there is a dark character who hunts wolves for the militia group. The militia group, and I think the way to look at this is that you are looking at the twin issues of the West right now. The people who are anti-government militias and they hate anything the government does, and the people who see the government as protectors of wildlife and the environment. And that is the setting of the story now. In addition, every other chapter is about a wolf pack. And it is evidently a famous wolf pack in New Mexico in the Gila Wilderness with a she-wolf known as 111. And so fascinatingly, you hear about the young man's story in one chapter, and then you move to the story of the wolves. So it has gotten some very good notices, and I liked it a lot.
Very, very good notices. Great reviews from people I respect. And one thing that all the reviewers note is that even though we're getting things from the perspective of 111, the leader of this wolf pack, he doesn't anthropomorphize her.
He really does not. He's an observer. What Taylor Brown clearly did is he studied the wolf behavior. He said that in his acknowledgments, that he was a student of the wolf behavior. Now, these are different wolves than we have where I am. These are lobos, which are smaller, and they are on the border of Mexico and New Mexico, not surprisingly. Let me talk about the narrator for a couple of minutes.
Oh, yes, do.
I had never heard any works by Monsef before, but his acting and emulating talents are really good. And the performance it was worthy of earphones. And he does all the characters, old, young, menacing, and menaced uniquely. They all have different sounds, personalities, and we'll hear that in the early scene in our sound sample. But he's really good at it, and I was shocked because I didn't know him, and I thought he has really studied these people because, like I said, I live in the West and I hear these kind of voices and I have run into these people with these very different kind of politics. The rancher, Trace Temple, is a nicely drawn character. His family their ranch has failed, and this happens in this part of the world, especially these days. And he's down on his luck, but he is a believable young man.
Well, to get back to Monsef for a second, Monsef also read Brown's book Rednecks. So I think he's quite familiar with Brown's writing. And a book I had listened to that Monsef had narrated was Exiles by Phil Caputo. And I remember being very impressed with him.
He's good. He's very good. I like Caputo, so maybe I will listen to that too.
Yeah, I recommend that highly. I think we should listen to a little of Wolvers.
This is an early scene, and it shows these attitudes that establish the plot.
This is Wolvers by Taylor Brown, read by Ramiz Monsef.
Meanwhile, a reporter is speaking from the Apache National Forest in New Mexico, where the body of a wolf from a federal reintroduction program has been recovered. This is the second Mexican wolf from the program found dead in recent months, illegally shot. Officials say the animal's deaths could be linked, but they're short on leads. Many ranchers, outfitters, and militia groups have remained vehemently opposed to the reintroduction program since its inception. Two men are standing down the trough. Big men with camouflage ball caps and rubber boots, perhaps father and son. The older one shakes his head, one fist perched on his hip. Can you imagine it? Being a cattleman and the feds decide to reintroduce wolves into your backyard. Wolves! Animals born to take down heifers. What a country we live in.
You can hear how Monsef is throwing himself fully into the performance, and you're right, he does give the book a real lived-in Western sound, but boy, how distinctly he shapes these voices. That's really great characterization.
I think it is too. And even the father and the son, who share the same point of view, sound quite different. One is much older.
Oh, very much so.
So I was very impressed with his work. I mean, we actually had wonderful narration, all three of these titles today. So that's always very satisfying when the narrators take you places and really give you that satisfying listen.
And with three such different audiobooks, too.
Completely different. If people were looking for a theme today, the only theme is they were all fiction.
True that. Well, Alan, thank you so much, and I will talk to you next month.
You're welcome, and I look forward to it as always.
As do I. Support for Behind the Mic comes from Nelson Books, publisher of The Missing Piece, written and narrated by Tim Ross, best-selling author and host of the popular podcasts The Basement and Wide Open, available everywhere you get your audiobooks. Tomorrow, we have a special sponsored edition of Behind the Mic. Michelle Cobb sits down with narrator January Lavoie to talk about the multicast production of The Divorce by Frida McFadden. It is an all-star cast with January, Marin Ireland, and Eduardo Ballerini. That's tomorrow. Michelle Cobb interviews January Lavoie. You won't want to miss it. You've been listening to Behind the Mic with Kirkus Reviews. If you follow us, we will appear in your feed. And please also follow Fully Booked by Kirkus Reviews, because it is the podcast for book lovers. Every Tuesday, host Megan Labrise brings you author interviews, industry insights, and recommendations from the bestseller list. Find your next great book on Fully Booked by Kirkus Reviews. You can follow Fully Booked and Behind the Mic on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or wherever you get your podcasts. And then stop by kirkusreviews.com to check out reviews for both print and audiobooks. Behind the Mic is produced by Jessica Lockhart. Michelle Cobb, Stephen Cummings, Leslie Fine, Alan Minskoff, Alex Ritchie, Laura Rossi, Laura Simeon, and Kendra Winchester are our contributors. Jennifer Dow is the editor with assistance from Alicia Langerman, and Tom Beer is the executive producer. The music is William Ross Chernoff's Nomads 4-Way, and I'm your host, Joe Reed. Good listening.